Mm, definitely Zoom tired today. As we get this started.
Would you say you're a zombie?
I'm a zombie. Yeah, I have been.
Oh my God, I'm stealing that.
I actually have been. I've been the Zoom ambassador for today's proceeding. So I have.
For all of them?
I've just been like handing people off. This is the only one I've been hosting like in this capacity, but I have been yeah, handing people the mic or the host job or whatever weird Zoom joke you want to make. But Zoom ambassador is one that I've been making.
That's amazing.
I like Zoom. What is it? Zoom B?
Zombie. Like you've had too many Zoom meetings and you get
I
that.
like that.
Like you're a zombie.
I'm gonna have to remember that and possibly steal it.
Go ahead.
All right, so I'm gonna let everyone in, and we're gonna get started right on time, which is great.
Cool.
So it's all gonna, yep, here's everybody. Hey everyone. We have officially shut off our waiting room, which is Zoom for, we're gonna start in a few minutes. But actually we could just start. We're about to be there. So hello. Oh hey, sorry, let me do one thing here. I'm gonna bring Neville in and give you some fancy jobs. Hey Neville.
Try to get rid of some of that light in that background. Yeah. All right.
Great. Hey folks. So I see a bunch of people here and I'm sure more people are going to keep coming in. Right out the gate, we are also recording this and it's on Facebook Live and we are on gallery view. So like your face is up there in the world. So I just want to give you that heads up so you're aware of what you're eating or what you are, which pets are there. But I mean, one of my many goals in this roundtable is to make it as human as possible, which is really, really hard to do on Zoom. But I think that's something we're called to do today, or it's one thing we can try to do today in this moment. Before we dive into the conversation, I just wanted to pause for a moment and just acknowledge that even in this digital space, like we are physically on native land. And I just especially want to acknowledge that in the context of COVID-19. I don't have a lot of statistics for you to share, but I just know when I see articles that there's an enormous amount of pain and death in the indigenous communities of this world, as well as in the United States. And that's heartbreaking to me. And so I just wanted to hold that space here at the top to say so. I also wanted to connect a little bit to the crisis for a quick moment. I find a lot of our conversations, or my conversations, have been kind of about about like the food I can't get at the store or about certain kinds of inconveniences. But I just pulled the World Health Organization numbers up, and I just wanted to remind us that the reason we can't be together in a room is because 4,619,477 people around the world have been confirmed to have a COVID-19 case. There have been 311,847 deaths. And that's probably both understated. And we're not through this yet. We're not opening, not on May 20th and not for some time. So I hope that data helps us kind of connect around the why, or like this is why we're actually in this strange circumstance. Anyways, I know those are both not, that's why we need creative power right now. It's because we're living through difficult times. So I thought that one quote I found that I really loved that could really, I think, root us in this is from a French philosopher that I have to admit I don't know a whole lot about, named Gilles Deleuze. If you do, you can like wave your hands or, I don't know, give me some act of proving that you know who they are. The quote goes like this. They write, "Every act of resistance is not a work of art, even though in a certain way it is. Every work of art is not an act of resistance, and yet in a certain way it is. And I'll include it in the chat, but this piece that he wrote called What is the Creative Act is full of these types of, it is resistance or activism or protest, and it's art, and it's beautiful, and it's all these things. So it's this complexity that I hope we can kind of explore today. We do have these panelists, and we're going to kind of start with the panelists, and then we're going to try to make the conversation bigger as we kind of move through the hour. So to get started, and they're awesome, and I've just been kind of chatting with them before we started, so I'm excited to get things rolling. So I'll get it started by modeling what we're going to do our intros, panelists. So I just want to know who you are, what your pronouns are, where you're from, and the kind of framing question to get us started, panelists, is how are you helping to renew our community with your creative power? You're all here because you are doing that, so it's guaranteed you're doing that. So I would just invite you to, for your kind of 2-minute intro to speak into that. So I'll go first, and I'll pass it to someone who's on our panel, and I'll help you all if you need help finding people who are on the panel. So I'm Daniel. I use he, him pronouns. I am from the Arts Council of Greater New Haven. Doing things like this is one way I'm using my creative power, I think, to help people, but I'm also not, I don't want to delve into the things that the Arts Council's doing. I want to hear from everyone else. So I will pass it over to Neville. Who are you? Where are you from? And how are you helping renew our community with your creative power?
So my name is Neville Wisdom, and I own Neville Wisdom Fashion Design Studios. I have a shop here at 903 Whaley Avenue, which I'm currently sitting in. And also have a shop on Chapel Street that's been closed since COVID, since the shutdown. I guess my contribution to the community right now is making face masks, reversible cloth face masks that people can buy in this current location and on our Neville.wisdom website. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Cool. Do you know other folks on the panel you can pass it to?
I pass it to Mandy.
You did it.
Jackson, yeah.
Thanks, Neville. My name's Mandy Jackson. I'm the executive director of Music Haven. For those who aren't familiar with us, we are a nonprofit. We're located in Fairhaven. We've been around for about 13 years, 14 years. The short version is we provide free lessons and instruments on strings to kids in New Haven who live in low-income neighborhoods. But really, we are sort of like a combination of a little free conservatory and a community center in many ways. And we have about 82 students this year. Our kids start with us when they're really little, and they stay through high school graduation. So the families that we serve, we've known them a really long time, most of them. And our teaching faculty is a group of amazing professional musicians who are in a string quartet called the Haven String Quartet. So we have both sort of the music that we're doing and trying to put out in the world, but also the ways in which we are continuing to make sure all of these kids and their families are okay. And so, oh, sorry, my pronouns are she, her, hers. And so in the last short while, we've really focused on those families and making sure their basic needs are met so that they can continue to do things like make music. Our lessons are continuing virtually, but in order to do that, we had to, for example, make sure they all had ways to access the internet at home and food assistance and things like that. So that's what we're doing.
Pass it away.
Oh, I have to look at Lauren.
Hey, thanks, Mandy. I'm Lauren Anderson, and along with Dolores Williams, I am the co-founder of People Get Ready, which is the community book space. It's a cross between a community reading room and an independent bookstore. We've only been around for like a hot minute. It's about to be our 1-year anniversary, and happily, like some people who are on this call were involved in some of our first events, and so it's a joy to be here. In terms of, pronouns she, her, hers. And in terms of, spreading creative power, I guess it's been, trying to get books to people in all different ways and forms. Actually making books available for pickup and delivery, new books, used books, fielding calls from some of the mutual aid folks who are looking to get books into the hands of kids who might need them, in particular, young readers, and then also doing some online read alouds just to kind of inspire joy of reading and to suggest as extension activities related to those things that involve harnessing young people's creative power, right? So right now is a time where I think a lot of kids are receptively engaged with screens. They're like receiving. And I worry a lot about that. And so often, these like reading events end with a call to make something or do something or dream something or build something. And I think like to the extent that we can get young folks engaged in acts of creation, the world will be better for it. So I'll kick it over to Patrick.
Oh, hey everyone, my name is Patrick Dunn. I'm the Executive Director of the New Haven Pride Center. We're one of the few LGBTQ+ organizations in the state of Connecticut, and we are the center here in Greater New Haven. We've been, we traditionally do a little bit of everything. We have programs that are support services and case management focused. We do a lot of social programming. We promote LGBTQ arts, culture, and humanity work. We do LGBTQ advocacy at the city, state, and federal level. And we do a lot of LGBTQ youth programs. As far as harnessing our kind of creative energy during COVID-19, we've been pumping out a lot of virtual resources and a lot of virtual programs. Every week, my incredible team that I get to work with just come up with more interesting and new ways to create programs. We've been doing a lot of community dialogue, some related to COVID and some not, trying to bring people together. I'm also super proud to share that I did the math the other day, and we've given out almost $7,000 to artists and gig workers since COVID began by hiring them to create art for us for our online coloring book, for doing drag artist story hour programs with People Get Ready, and for hiring them to speak on panels about a variety of subjects from queer Black feminism to being queer and Latinx and dealing with COVID. So it's been a really interesting ride, and I give all the props out to the incredible team that I get to work with every day. And my pronouns are he, him, although I respond to basically everything because I'm also a drag queen. And I'm going to hand it off over to Hope.
Thank you. Hi, folks. I'm Hope Chavez. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am the artistic producer at Long Wharf Theater, and I'm also one of the volunteer organizers with At Home in New Haven, which is the other affiliation I bring to this conversation in particular. Did you ask us where we're from? Was that part of this? Oh no, that was like institutionally, not geographically.
You can take it what it is, Hope.
Nah, I'm not. It's all good. Yeah, there's a lot of things that I feel really grateful to be a part of in terms of thinking about centering the community, renewing the community, specifically creatively. I think At Home in New Haven is one of the most visible examples of that in terms of my daily life right now. So this is a platform that's, we call it like a virtual stage. We had opening week, May 4th that week. And it was really amazing. It was all kinds of classes and art presentations, concerts. There was even like, we had a licensed social worker come in and do like a facilitated conversation. So this was really like putting dollars into the hands of gig workers. The Arts Council is actually our fiscal sponsor. So putting dollars into the hands of gig workers by guaranteeing them a base pay, but then also making them financially accessible to the community of New Haven who wants to participate in these sessions, because they were $5 or free if you used the code that we had online. So I think of that as like a way of, Anthony, who's actually on this call, was the originator of that idea. And it's all about creating spontaneous moments for connection and learning, and just, we're missing those moments in the theater, in the restaurants, in the coffee shops where we're running into our New Haven friends and family. But at Longworth first, we're doing things as well. I would say it's, at the moment, we're actually really sitting with reflection. We're really spending time with the artists and the community members who have long been a part of our family, asking more about what they need and what we can do than just rushing to the output place. And I think that has a lot more to do though with like the history of the institution, and the debt we have to pay, frankly, with the community of New Haven, communities of color in particular. But some of the things that we have done, so we're partnering with, or we're endorsing, the Cancel Rent Now Connecticut movement with Kerry Washington. So that's some of the organizing work we're involved with. We also have a lot of our production staff who don't need to be building sets right now and building costumes, have been part of creating materials for health workers and first responders, so like masks and shields and things like that. So we're trying to think of like the resources that we have as an institution and pivoting those to this particular moment, and the creative energy and resiliency that I think our staff really has in wanting to give back to New Haven in this moment.
I have one of your staff today,
Who do you have?
yeah, I had one of your staff come in today for an interview. So to pick up a couple of extra hours, helping us out over
That's
here.
amazing. That's
I
amazing.
love that.
From the theater, yeah.
Hope, the last pass is kind of like to the crew that we have here, this awesome crew we have here from the Free Them All project, from the Bail Fund. Can you all do like a sort of like collective introduction?
Sophie, I see Sophie and Sarah as well. My name is Jania. I'm from New Haven, and I'm a community organizer at the Connecticut Bail Fund. And, we are an organization that supports our community members who have been hurt and held captive by our so-called criminal justice system. So our work is rooted in resistance to policing and incarceration. We're abolitionists, so we're not here to reform or remake systems. We're here to work towards a world where policing, incarceration, white supremacy, patriarchy, all of these destructive forces of oppression no longer exist. And that kind of grounds, a lot of the direction of what we do and the spirit of what we do. And in the time of this pandemic, we have been with our communities across the state building a movement to free them all. And this movement, we believe that everyone should be free because human beings do not belong in cages. And we know that in this pandemic, COVID-19 has turned incarceration into a death sentence. So, we've been working with communities across Connecticut. And when we talk about creative power, I think about collective creative power, not individual creative power, because that's, to us, where the force is. I can't tell you how many incredible freedom fighters have risen up, especially over the last few months, most of them Black and brown women fighting for their loved ones and community members who are incarcerated, joining with other families and freedom fighters across the state to do, for example, mass protests on, I think 10 different prisons at this point across the state, on the governor who has refused to do anything to really put in a formal plan for releasing our loved ones and community members from incarceration. We also have seen, the community really rise up in supporting our commissary fund, which allows us to drop money to those who are incarcerated so that they can buy soap, food, and other critical items they need to protect themselves. We are also doing public education, because this is the time for us to really question, what policing and incarceration represent. and our reliance on these systems. We really, you know, the prison industrial complex is everywhere. It's in how we think about who is a good and worthy person. You know, it's in how we think about discipline in our school systems. It's in the mind of our own mayor, you know, who, when we asked him to shut down New Haven Police Department lockup, said that cleanings would make the jail safe. And he said people in there are suspected of some pretty heinous crimes. So we see, you know, a deep carcerality everywhere in the landscape of our own city, in the mind of our own mayor. He's a very, I would say, very carceral mayor. And we still see our community members being policed, arrested in the midst of a global pandemic. And so right now is a moment that we feel that policing and incarceration need to be recognized as hazards on our community, and they're like a direct public health hazard right now. And so, you know, we really see the community rising up to really change, like, how we think about these systems and these forces. And one of the things we do also is that we do participatory defense, which is every week we have 3 community meetings with over 100 families across the state to basically start putting in legal motions for freedom. So sentence modification, medical furlough, bond reduction, depending on the person's case. And so that, I wish I could show everyone the love and, you know, the collaboration and creativity that goes on in those community meetings. And sorry, I'm going on and on, but
I'm with you. Can you make sure that Sarah, I just want to hear from Sarah and Sophie too. Can you introduce them?
So Sarah and Sophie are incredible artists that have been working not only with the CT Bell Fund, but also Justice for Jason, and really like getting our messages around justice, freedom, and liberation into an even more powerful form of expression. And I want to let them kind of represent their work, but so, you know, so much of the power of what we do would not be there without the art and ways of conveying the messages that people can really feel. So. Oh, Sarah, Sophie, do you want to?
Anything? I want to give you a chance to say hey, and then we'll open up the floor.
Yeah, I can be super brief. I'm Sophie. My pronouns are she, her. I can drop for the link, the zine Sarah and I made for Free Them All. And we've just been trying to think of different ways that we can use visual art to sort of pick up narratives that aren't getting picked up right now about how policing and incarceration are super dangerous. And I really just want to echo what Jania said about collective creative power and just how there are so many people who are a part of this work.
Sarah, she, her pronouns. I think I just echo Jania and Sophie on the collective power of our work and how it just is so important to have every member of the community involved. And yeah, that's all I got. And Jania handled it all.
Sorry.
Oh, well, let me, so these are our people, but also like everyone on this call are our people for this really like a roundtable conversation, not a panel chat. But I thought one way we could kind of we could pretend like we're in the room together is if someone from the panel could ask a question of someone else on the panel, like just to get that kind of dynamic thing started. So, you know, if you're on the panel, like, what are you curious about? I think we just laid out a lot of really interesting things that we might want to explore into. So what are you curious about each other? And then we'll just keep widening the circle. We'll keep opening it up for more folks to say like, oh, what else are you curious about? And we'll just keep going for a little bit. Oh, and you could just unmute yourself. I'm not going to be the mute person. You could just, if you all know how to do it, if you need help with that, just let me know in the chat. But yeah, panel, what do you want to know about each other?
Way to ask a really broad question, Dan.
Well, okay, I'll jump in. Jania, I'm really curious about what support, if any, you would be interested in some of the arts institutions here in New Haven giving to this particular movement and your organizing.
Thank you. I love that question, and I also want to give space for Sophie and Sarah to reflect on it as well. I think, you know, from what I was saying before around, I think so many people, you know, we're trained in this world pretty much from the moment that we're born or we come into this country to think of certain systems as legitimate and just. And I think we have trouble really seeing the true violence of these systems, and also the true power that people have, not institutions. And I think that's something that, you know, our local art institutions can help us make more visible, both the violence and the power. And both of those things are needed, because I think, you know, sometimes in arts communities, there is this focus on, I think, healing and beauty, and I love healing and beauty, but also there's so many things that we don't see, that we don't want to see. And so I think that there's really a role for our arts institutions on those fronts, because, you know, a lot of the actions that we do when we go on the street, that is building power. That is a form of truth telling. You know, that is a form of connecting the different experiences and forces that we bear in this world. So we absolutely need the help of artists in doing that, and being present with us also when we're on the streets. As well as, you know, for example, our mayor, Justin Elicker, has not responded to a single demand and request that we've put out over 3 months. 2 people have died in New Haven from incarceration, but we're not talking about it, right? Deshaun Wilson, 31 years old, died in New Haven Police Department lockup on April 15th, right? And Caleb John Martin, who was only 26 years old, died from COVID 2 days after he was released from New Haven Correctional, because the DOC is keeping people incarcerated until the brink of death and then releasing them so they don't have to take responsibility for the deaths. Why is the city not talking about these deaths? Why are we not going to the mayor's doorstep, you know, with our banners, with our freedom signs, our freedom art, to press him to act? And I think that's where it's like, when it gets uncomfortable, or when it involves, you know, potentially squandering like your capital with the mayor, or compromising different relationships, people are more silent. They're not with us. We did an action on Justin Elicker's house. Very few people were able to come, you know, so we really want the arts community there with us in the political action and on the streets, and able to kind of, you know, put a stake down where it may be difficult or require sacrifice. But sorry, again, I always go on
what you're getting when it's local, right? It's hard, like when it's hard to see sometimes what's right in our front yards. We might be concerned about things that are more national and global. Any other panelists have interactive questions for each other? And then I'll open the floor.
I'll ask one. So I think the panel's a really interesting mix of individuals, but a lot of us work in nonprofit sectors. But Lauren and Neville, you both are tremendous small business contributors to our city. And I guess one of the questions that I would ask is, you know, obviously we have access to different funds as nonprofits than some of the funds that you all are accessing or able to access. And what are ways that we can elevate your voice in our city to make sure we don't lose our People Get Ready or our Neville Wisdoms, which are, in my opinion, vital to the cultural landscape of Greater New Haven?
Well, for us, in terms of like accessing financial financing from due to the COVID, that doesn't necessarily play out for how Neville Wisdom is structured. I started changing the course of how we operate in terms of how the studio behaves. And for me, my life was always about doing something that also impacts my community, not just in the format of being here and being this elaborate guy that likes to do interesting stuff, but also to empower individuals who are interested in this kind of creative art form. And so started early January, I restructured the company in a way where our individuals that are here are people who actually want to be here. And so the studio is open for them to be able to be their own creative with me, sort of manning, almost sort of like Music Haven, you know, but for us, it's like a design. And so their responsibilities in terms of what my offering is to teach them what they know. And so in turn, they'll do little odds and ends for me as well. And then we have some other independent contractors that come in and out of the studio to do the bulk work of Neville Wisdom. And currently we have somewhere around, I'd say close to 7 or 8 individuals that are had been frequenting the shop for quite some time. If you had seen any one of my last fashion shows, you would have met Dwayne, who has been here. He's an inner city young African-American single parent, lives with his mom. His mom works at St. Raphael, and he was going to a school in New York that closed for fashion design, but he just couldn't afford to get into another school. And so he has been training here for quite some time now, and he's very efficient in terms of like being able to run Neville Wisdom. Hannah has become a part of Neville Wisdom, but within that, still staying true to his individuality, which is what we also strongly recommend here. So we don't have that employee sort of like structure that could access funding. As a matter of fact, I applied for one of these programs and got $1,000, which I'm grateful for anything that I get, you know, because it's better than nothing. And so it's difficult as small businesses because of how, you know, we say it's small business, but it's really micro to the 10th, to the 100th, you know, business. So the structure is way different. So it's very difficult for businesses like ours to really access any kind of like funding.
But Neville, I want to just ask one thing though, because you shifted. How quickly did you shift to making masks, and how did that happen for you?
So you know, I actually, once the pandemic came obvious that it was going to be something very serious in terms of the effects of individuals in the US, I immediately started doing research because I wanted to. I worked as a surgical tech back in 2000, some years back, a long time ago, but I used to wear masks and stuff like that. And I remember they always had this special type of material that they use for surgery to keep sterility and so that germs wouldn't. So, you know, that was my job, is to keep a sterile platform at all times. And so I was trying to access some of those materials at first to see if we could use those to make masks. And but it was difficult because the hospital wouldn't really necessarily release those kinds of material, even though a lot of them get thrown away after surgery and stuff like that. So I watched and just kept looking, and then when the CDC said that they were going to allow the making of face masks, cloth face masks, then I was like, okay, well, I might as well just go to the studio and get into that. And we've donated quite a few face masks as well, and people have contributed to the studios for us to make masks, and it's helping us stay afloat.
That's right. Doug mentioned in the chat to me that you'd filmed 200 and then another 600, and he said your organization would have sunk without Neville. So cheers. Lauren, I don't want to cut you off. I want to hear your response to Patrick also.
Yeah, well, it's wonderful to hear Neville share that too. And Patrick, thanks for the question. I mean, I think
great question.
we're not we're not really eligible for being
Exactly.
so new and so small, right? We're not eligible for much of the like support at the moment, but we've been so fortunate to receive the support of like community members. And I would say there are a few ways to, I think, support small businesses like ours. The first is just like partnerships. So an example, you know, Patrick and I have been in conversation around Drag Queen Story Hour and figuring out ways to like partner with local organizations that have book related needs and to kind of keep, you know, the circle of support going just inside of the city. And that's been a joy. I think it raises people's awareness and it also builds relationships. The second thing is talking to people about patience. So not everything, oftentimes things that you can get really, really quickly.
Patience, like the patience time.
Yes, yes.
Not medical patients.
Exactly. Yes, sorry. And I mean, keep talking about patience too, but patience, right? That things that you can get really quickly often come at a great cost to human beings. And so, you know, we might not always be able to get you a book as quick as some other outlets, but we can get you a book in a way that does less damage to the environment, that supports our local economy, and that is connected to a whole bunch of other sort of virtuous circles. The third thing would be like principled spending, like to actually, now is really an amazing moment to starve the beast that is Amazon, for example, and to support local businesses instead. And I would say, when I say support local businesses, like we don't see ourselves as being in competition with Book Trader or Atticus. Please go and purchase books from those places. They're a really important part of our community and our like sort of literacy and arts community. And anytime we spend money in ways that support our funds and keep our funds local, we do a whole lot of good for the like for the city, for the city's children and its families. And it helps keep jobs local. It's good for the environment. There are all of these things that I think, so talking to people and sort of being involved in the sort of like education of just like your peers and not being preachy necessarily about it, but really letting people know that how we spend our money and where we put funds matters a lot. Yeah, you know, we're happy to partner on anything. So I think
That's
I'll
great.
just,
Well, let's keep pretending like we're in the room together and make the circle a little bit bigger. So I just invite anyone who's on the call, if you want to have your video on, put it on. If you want to unmute and ask a question, unmute and ask it. If you would rather put it in the chat, totally do that. I'm happy to try to do that. It doesn't have to be a question that is for a specific person, but it could be a question for a specific person. It could just be something. I just want to frame it as a question though, not as like, I want to say something. So if you have a question, unmute yourself and say it, put it in the chat box. Whatever you do, do not raise your hand. The last thing I want to do is for you to raise your hand in this particular conversation, because that's not how we are in space together, right? This isn't real. So, and I'm okay with a couple seconds of silence while someone figures out what their question is or gets brave enough to put on their video.
I guess it's not so much a question, but it's conversation, since we're having sort of like a roundtable talk. You know, this idea of having two businesses in New Haven and trying to, like, you know, make the most of it. I particularly am someone who's who always goes back to the creative side of what it is that I do, and it's one of the things that has really made the impact or the could be impact of what could happen to potentially a business that's been in the community as such for as long as it has. And not to dive too much into the what ifs and or try to predict the future too much, but just to keep a sensible mind and a good energy and the creative aspect of being able to be in this space has significantly helped the individuals that are here. And we've been practicing social distancing and trying to make sure that we don't get anybody sick here. But just and it's just something that I think is going to be helpful if definitely we can get a creative aspect to it to really get people to take their minds off of it to some extent, because there's a lot of struggles right now.
Forcing my hand, I'm thinking of many questions. Well, I'll ask one, and I hope it inspires others, which is to Mandy, because I just think there's and actually you made me think of it, Neville, because again, like there's one narrative in the creative sector right now that's like, we can't do this. And then there's another narrative, which is like, we have to do this. Like, we have to be creative. We have to keep using what we're passionate about. And you're in that space, Mandy, with kids. And I know you're not teaching them, because then I don't know what they would learn. But I'd be curious, like, what you're hearing from your teachers and your families about, like, what it means to have that reminder every week, with their lessons or their group classes, that like being creative, I sometimes wish I had that to like remind me, like, I need to create right now. I need to be creative or self-expression.
Yeah, our teachers have been amazing at coming up with ways of reaching each household, each kid, and the kids really, they rise to the occasion and are excited to use the technology that we've helped them get their hands on. And I've heard from both the musicians and teachers themselves, and from our students and from our parents, what a difference it makes to have that in their lives as something that is a little piece of normal, as something that gives them the opportunity to do something that's not just looking at a screen. They have a lot of schoolwork that a lot of them have to do online, but also a lot of them aren't able to do that because they're caring for younger siblings or cousins. We have a lot of families where a parent is a frontline worker and is at work. We have a lot of families where people have gotten sick, and to have this thing that's still there a few times a week, something that they can just be communicating through. But also the group classes, when they all see each other. I've sat in on some of these virtually, and just the look on their faces when they see each other and have the chance to interact with each other. We have one teacher who each week is getting all of his own students together, and they had an entire class where all they did was share their pets with each other. Like, here's my bird, this is my turtle. And it was, 35 minutes of that. There wasn't any music happening, but you could tell how much they needed to see each other and needed to be connecting with each other. And that's something, we can't give them everything. You can't really replicate an in-person violin lesson over the internet, but you certainly can give them the chance to do that. And I think has been really important.
That's really interesting. Anything else people want to ask or share of each other in this bizarre, not circle, but square of Brady Bunch tiles?
I would just share one other thing, which is that one of the important things that the arts can do is just the way that the arts connects people, which is far more powerful than a lot of the ways people are connected. And we found right out of the gate, when the schools shut down and we had to close our doors, that we had connections, our teachers had connections with their students, we had connections with our families because of this relationship that we've built through the arts. that even the schools didn't have. We had the schools asking for us about how to get in contact with some families. We actually knew where there were acute basic like needs that needed to be met before, you know, some of the city office like youth services or other the Board of Ed or other city offices knew, because we have built these relationships through the involvement that we've had, that is only, you know, only exists because of this relationship through music. And it's a very tangible, very concrete way. We always talk about how the arts connect people, but this is in a very concrete way that we're connected to the families that are part of our organization. And even though we spent the first few weeks focused on things that weren't necessarily related to the arts, it was only because of those connections through the arts that those relationships have been built.
Does anyone think that, like, to that point, Mandy, that like this time has actually been like a more creative and generative time for you or your institution? Like, have you done things sooner or in a different way? Or like, whereas, like, I'm not saying it's a good thing that we have this, but have there been moments where you're like, wow, we wouldn't have been able to probably imagine that. We couldn't have, we've been forced to create something out of this that we hadn't thought of before.
I would jump in and say yes, that I feel that way. I think that because we kind of had to dismantle our entire structural model of how we did everything, and you know, we at the Pride Center actually stayed open pretty late because we have a lot of folks who are housing insecure and food insecure that utilize our services, and folks in the community that really have nowhere else to go to talk to someone like our case management program. So we stayed open until we were forced to close, which is when they stopped cleaning our building that we physically lived in. You know, once our space was physically closed, you know, we kind of really took on what's become our motto for this whole thing, which is build community when we can't share space. And constantly challenging ourselves to think about, like, how do we build community for a community that desperately needs it, because they might be a 16-year-old trans person living at home with parents who don't accept them. They might be, you know, an LGBTQ person who lives alone with no pet, no support system, and family that don't love them. And so it's vital for us to create connections, because homophobia and transphobia thrive in isolation. If you're alone and you have nobody else to support you, your mental health, your physical well-being, all of those things are going to start to deteriorate. And which is why we see such high rates of, you know, mental health struggles, suicide in the LGBTQ community. So we don't have an option not to create ways to connect people. It's just not an option. We don't have an option to not function and close our doors, because if we do that, nobody else is here to do that work. And it's not an acceptable outcome. So we have to be creative. And what that has done, because nothing that we had planned for March, April, May, or June could have actually happened at this point, we had to come up with new things to do. We had to come up and think of new ways to work with our community, with people in the community, and partner with amazing organizations around our city, around our state. You know, we're having conversations in the queer community that never happen, like conversations about how do we have a statewide virtual Pride event that everyone can participate in? How do we have a statewide virtual prom for the kids that aren't welcome in their own proms? Like, how do we do these things? And, you know, there's only so many of us around the state doing this kind of work from an institutional perspective. And, you know, a lot of us know each other and talk to each other regularly, but we also stay in our own little corners. And we don't have that luxury right now. And, you know, within 3 weeks of COVID-19, all of us banded together and did a statewide needs assessment for the LGBTQ community, and found, you know, food insecurity was going to go over 50% after April 30th if things remain closed. People were going to start losing their jobs more and more. You know, NBC just released that LGBTQ people are more likely to have been affected economically by losing their jobs than any other group of people. And that's just realities that we live in. So we had to be creative and think of ways to, like, combat those issues. And so I think, you know, like, obviously I would never wish that this happened, but in a way it's validating our work in a totally new way. And, you know, really making us look at what we do and how we do it and say, why are we even doing that? Or why are we doing it that way anymore at all? And like things like our virtual talks that we've been doing 3 or 4 months, we're going to be doing those probably for the rest of time. From now on, all of these programs will also be available online, because we found, running our support groups virtually has meant the person way up in Windham County that had no support system for them at all suddenly has a support group meeting they can call into once a week. And it's completely changed how people can access what we do. And so in some ways, it's benefited us to have to go through this creative process.
I'm curious, Hope, if that was like how At Home in New Haven kind of, like did that kind of get leveraged as well? Like we didn't have At Home in New Haven before. So like, did that connect people together, like through especially a creative and cultural experience?
Absolutely. Like, and I think a lot about, like even just for myself, like obviously I can't speak to everyone who joined in as a participant and whether or not they were doing those things before, but I can certainly say, I wasn't making a regular habit to go to breathing room and do yoga. I wasn't like teaching myself how to make bread. I wasn't like carving out time to have a conversation with folks about like, what does self-care look like in this moment? And so offering it with, we're still talking about accessibility and what that means, because it's false to say that it's a fully accessible platform just because it's free and it's online. Lots of folks don't have access to good Wi-Fi. Some presenters don't have the equipment they need to do the session. So we're still evaluating that, but making it more accessible than those programs were for a long time. I certainly have like anecdotal evidence to say that that has connected more people, but also like we're moving into a stage now of co-creation of like, so opening week happened, now we're pausing, we're having conversations with presenters with, we hope to have more conversations soon with the folks who sponsored sessions and participated in sessions, and say like, this really belongs to you, the community. And even though Anthony, Paul, Slate, and I were the ones to sort of build the infrastructure of it, to pilot one version of the idea, there are now more people in conversation building creatively with each other than I think was happening before, right? Like people are talking to each other across sectors and across communities to take ownership of this and to continue to iterate it moving forward. So I think that's pretty amazing. And like in the theater community too, I'm seeing there's still like nationally, there's still a whole lot of like scarcity mindset, a whole lot of like falling back on white supremacist structures that benefit the few. But I will say that at least here in Connecticut and sort of on the East Coast, I feel really grateful that like the theaters are eager to innovate and to partner together in ways that like in theater I have seen everyone feels very like in competition with one another. There's like my audience and I don't want to share my audience with anyone else's audience, right? So Maddie Ardito, who's also on this call right now, is our Director of Learning and Community Organizing, and she's been getting together with the folks at the other Connecticut theaters and talking about like, what does it look like to create learning programs for folks next year, and like, how do we share that? And we're certainly talking about it from an artistic perspective, and we're exploring artistic ideas that I think we would have said, like we wouldn't have taken the risk on. So like so many more outdoor ideas, so many more ideas for like, I mean, everyone's talking about this right now, but like, what does a drive-in theater experience look like, right? So there's all these ideas bubbling up that we're exploring that have like, that feel radical, I guess, to those of us who are like, let's build a subscription season model. And that's like, I'm thoroughly enjoying that, like forcing my brain to unwire and make new pathways.
Are we still taking questions?
Oh,
I have a question.
Yeah.
Well, I was kind of just wondering, how, different people, organizations, collectives in the arts community, and how the other people here on the call today kind of see their artwork, artistic work in relation to the prison industrial complex. So either, in linkage to it or how it can be used to intervene on it. So I'm curious to get the panelists responses, because as we well know, the International Festival of Arts and Ideas routinely uses policing to do mass arrests to clear our homeless community from the green before their summer events. So this is a clear example of when like the arts industrial complex uses the prison industrial complex to enable, its work. And so I just kind of wanted to ask people how they saw, the connections between their work and the PIC.
I mean, I can jump in first if everybody's. So we for our artistic programming, we do not use police forces. So for things like Pride New Haven, we don't have police officers guarding entrances and stuff like that. Obviously, we take individual safety very seriously. There's a reality that as a minority group that is often a target of systematic violence. We do have to be very conscious of people's safety, but we don't believe in like the armed guards that guarding the entrance into Pride or any of that, or clearing out spaces of our housing insecure community, which we help the other 364 days a year. So it would be kind of silly to march them out on day 365. I'm very fortunate that on our team we actually have one of the members of the board of the CT Bail Fund, Juan Carlos Soto, and several activists that also work with the Bail Fund, who are part of our staff. So I would say that, we have a lot of these kinds of conversations about, combating systematic violence against queer bodies, which often takes the form of the industrial complex and other forms of systematic oppression. So I would say that I would like to think that we try to stand up against those systems as much as possible, particularly in the context of our artistic and cultural endeavors.
I also just want to say I really appreciate you asking that question. And it's something that like People Get Ready certainly is looking to be more involved in the future. And in the meantime, it's like always been a part of what we aim to do is to carry works by abolitionists. So Ruthie Gilmore Wilson's like Golden Gulag, our Prison's Obsolete by Angela Davis, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. You can find those all in stock at People Get Ready all the time, 365 days a year. And then also really trying to highlight with a wider group of young people books that interrogate just incarceration as a taken for granted practice. So there are a few children's books that are getting like woven into the read alouds, right? That are about some of the really toxic impacts of policing and imprisoning people on our local communities. And so we just invite people to partner with us around that, especially, we're on the Whaley corridor. We are a block down from the jail. I walk up and down Whaley every single day. I see interactions between people who are along Whaley and police. And it's just it's totally a part of the mission that we want to make sure that we're partnering around and helping to like uplift people's consciousness, especially in relationship to like the arts and artistic production in the city and how it can be marshaled for like political ends.
And what is, you couldn't have like given me the better pivot, Jania. So I think like I'm still holding both these things through this conversation, right? This like reality that like this pandemic has created like disaster in our world, in our local communities, but it's also highlighted the disasters that have always been there in front of us. And I don't want to, this has been amazing. We can keep doing this forever, but, and we will. The idea here of the civic space is that we can kind of do more of these throughout time, right? It doesn't have to just happen because we're in this pandemic, but I know the folks at the city, the folks behind this idea of this civic space is excited to keep it going. So I would say, just like at Home in New Haven, like would be curious to hear your ideas and what other conversations we need to have as a city, as a region through this. But I also found so I'm gonna just like crib back to the beginning, like the quote I shared at the start was actually from a HowlRound article. If you don't read HowlRound because you like don't work in theater, you still should, because it's really awesome space for all kinds of creative thinking. And it's an article that Israel Aloni wrote. I don't know who this person is, but the title of the article was called On Art and Activism. And I think it's a perfect thing to send us off on. I'm also just going to say thanks again to the panel and everyone who joined us and the folks who've been involved in organizing all these things today. And yeah, again, this is just like, we'll see you soon kind of a thing, because I think we'll do more of these over time. The quote says this, I'm going to put it in the chat too for people who like to read. Make art, be proud of what you do, invest in what you do, trust what you do. Do not shy from the responsibility that is conjoined with making art and being an artist. By doing the act of making art, you turn the wheels of society. Express yourself and promote your visions through your art. You are enough. Being an artist is enough. See you soon. Thanks for being here.